दोस्तों, जीटी लॉग पॉडकास्ट के इस एपिसोड में आप सब लोगों का एक बार फिर से स्वागत है। आज हमारे गेस्ट डॉक्टर रितु माथुर मैडम हैं। मैडम, स्वागत है आपका। और हमारे को होस्ट हमारे साथ में है अंकुर शर्मा, फ्लॉक एनर्जी के सीईओ या फाउंडर या को फाउंडर हैं। तो जी ने सबसे पहले अपनी जो शिक्षा के बारे में बात करते हैं तो उन्होंने बिजनेस इकोनॉमिक्स डीयू या दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी से किया और फिर पीएचडी हासिल की क्योटो यूनिवर्सिटी जापान से। और फिर बहुत सारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस में काम करने के बाद जो लेटेस्ट कार्यरत थी वो नीति आयोग में एनर्जी कंसल्टेंट के रूप में थी और अभी करंट में सीनियर फेलो एंड डायरेक्टर टेरी के साथ में कार्य कर रही हैं। मैम, इस जर्नी में जब हम लोग अभी पॉडकास्ट का डिस्कशन करेंगे तो हम लोग कोशिश करेंगे कि एक जनरल डिस्कशन या एक फ्री फ्लो डिस्कशंस में करें। हम लोग हिंदी, इंग्लिश या मिक्स में भी कम्युनिकेशन कर सकते हैं और कोशिश करेंगे कि हम लोग जब आज का जो डिस्कशन है वो डेटा, एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन, पॉलिसीज, इन सब के अराउंड घूमेगा तो कुछ कंक्लूजन भी लाने की कोशिश करते हैं। तो अंकुर और हम लोग साथ मिल करके कुछ क्वेश्चन पूछेंगे मैम। बिल्कुल, ठीक है, थैंक यू सो मच। तो मैम, एक आपका एक आई थिंक यू हैव बीन इन्वॉल्व्ड विद आईपीसीसी के 5th and 6th रिपोर्ट्स में भी आपने कंट्रीब्यूट किया है एज ए लीड ऑथर। तो आईपीसीसी, जिसको हम लोग इंटर गवर्नमेंटल पैनल फॉर क्लाइमेट चेंज के नाम से जानते हैं, बहुत सारे लोग इसको जानते हैं, बट हम आपसे रिक्वेस्ट करेंगे कि आईपीसीसी के बारे में थोड़ा बताएं और जो रिपोर्ट्स पब्लिश होती हैं उन रिपोर्ट्स का इम्पैक्ट क्या होता है या क्या हो रहा है अभी तक।
तो आईपीसीसी, जैसे आपने कहा, इंटर गवर्नमेंटल पैनल ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज, ये जो काम करता है इन रिपोर्ट्स को ब्रिंग आउट करने में, इसमें 3 तरह की रिपोर्ट्स निकलती हैं। वर्किंग ग्रुप 1, 2 and 3 कहलाती हैं। एक जो कि क्लाइमेट साइंस पे फोकस करती है पहली, दूसरी जो कि मिटिगेशन पे फोकस करती है और एक जो अडेप्टेशन साइड पे ज्यादा फोकस करती है। मेरा रोल मिटिगेशन वालों पे रहा है।
अच्छा।
बट तीनों जो हैं वो एक तरह से थ्रेडेड हैं कि एक दूसरे से बात करती हैं कि अगर ये साइंस हमें बताती है कि क्लाइमेट चेंज में क्या हो रहा है या क्या होगा, फिर उसके आगे मिटिगेशन साइड पे आपको क्या क्या करना है, कैसे चीजें अफेक्ट होंगी, क्या पॉलिसीज काम कर सकती हैं और जगह क्या पॉलिसीज काम कर रही हैं, स्टेट ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी क्या है वगैरह। और फिर तीसरा है जो कि अडेप्टेशन साइड पे रिस्क्स और उन चीज़ों पे ज़्यादा ध्यान देता है कि अब इसका इम्पैक्ट क्या होगा और वो इम्पैक्ट और उसको उसके लिए सॉल्यूशंस क्या हो सकते हैं। तो मेरा वर्क मिटिगेशन वाले रिपोर्ट पे रहा है। अगेन, बहुत लोग समझते हैं कि आईपीसीसी रिपोर्ट ने कुछ खास चीज कह दी या वो कुछ डायरेक्शन दे रही है। ये ट्रू नहीं है। आईपीसीसी रिपोर्ट्स जो हैं वो लिटरेचर को अक्यूमुलेट करके उसका निचोड़ प्रोवाइड करती हैं।
okay.
अपने आप वो कुछ नहीं कहती। So everything that we put together in the IPCC reports as authors, lead authors or CLAs, is from scientific literature, from journals which are peer reviewed, refereed, and we bring it together, and वो भी एक तरीके से किया जाता है in terms of कितना robust evidence base है, कितनी level of uncertainty है। तो each statement which comes into the literature compilation is evaluated by a large number of scientists and authors who pay attention to whether that sentence can be or should be put in the report or not.
Because of punctuation का भी difference,
punctuation का तो difference होता ही है, but also you could have literature which is focused only on one region and probably saying it for that region, which cannot be therefore taken as being applicable to the whole world. Or it may be an example which is for a particular section but not applicable to something else. So you have to qualify it accordingly, and therefore a team is always looking at is this the correct representation or not? So in a sense, it is not any one person's view. It is what literature has already put in. That said, फिर भी there are lots of questions raised about IPCC report ने ये कैसे कह दिया. But there's again a process which after the authors have put in the draft reports, it goes through a review process even through the governments. So again, various governments also take a look at it to point out whether what has been said has been put in the correct way or not. कुछ बहुत छोटी चीजें like a could or a should or a would can make a lot of difference to what is the implication of that sentence. And therefore, the onus on the researchers and the people who are working on these IPCC reports is quite a heavy responsibility in terms of bringing the literature and the findings to the public in a way that is correctly represented. So, I mean, in that sense, it's a process of writing the IPCC reports, which is very, very meticulous, which goes through many hours of deliberations, discussions, research, putting it together, seeing what you should and how you should bring out the analysis such that it makes the correct sense, etc. Also, a lot of learning in the process. But having said that, from an Indian point of view or a developing country perspective, I would say sometimes we have much more grey literature. We have probably literature which is written in regional languages. How does this get to the IPCC literature process? So again, it becomes very important for us to realize and understand that if we are doing research in the developing countries and countries like India and other smaller countries, it's also important to make that literature published in peer-reviewed journals to be able to voice the concerns that we have. Otherwise, if the literature is not there, we cannot blame people for not putting it into the...
I totally agree. To be very honest, sometimes I also feel कि जैसे international journals में भी बहुत सारे ऐसे maybe research papers हम लोग देखते हैं और हमें लगता है कि maybe I think a small university maybe down south Tamil Nadu में बहुत अच्छी research कर रही है, but the paper is not published or published in a local journals और उसी में उनके जो points हैं वो मिल जाते हैं. Then
correct. I mean, there were many times when I wanted to write a sentence because I knew it, but because I could not cite it, I could not write it. So I mean, in that sense, you need to have even, for example, our policies. We have so many good schemes. We have so many good policies. We see progress in certain areas, certain states, certain regions having worked effectively. But if it's not written, how do we showcase the success of something?
Yes.
So again, I think it's important to have good literature being brought out.
Very nice.
To be able to talk about our issues, to talk about our actions, and to talk about how we have scaled up or wherever we have best practices, success stories, whatever. So that's
a very great piece of information. मुझे याद है कि हम 2007 में जब सबसे पहली बार नोबेल पीस प्राइज मिला था, then only we got to know कि हाँ, that is how maybe such international level panel is existing और उसमें ये सब चीजें होता है. तो sometime मुझे लगता है recognition बहुत important part है. तो I'm coming to one more point with respect to maybe I think before we delve into the subject of discussion. जैसे मतलब एक क्यूरियोसिटी हमेशा रहती है कि प्लानिंग कमीशन से जब हम लोगों ने शिफ्ट किया नीति आयोग में, लेट्स से 2015 में, तो और मतलब जब हम लोग प्लानिंग कमीशन एज ए मतलब एक विभाग को देखते हैं, एक संस्था को देखते हैं, तो वी ऑलवेज रियलाइज कि मतलब एक ऐसी एपेक्स बॉडी है जो कि इंडिया की डेप्थ को टच कर रही है. we look at maybe urban people, poor people, diversified geographical locations, climate, energy transition, इतनी सारी चीजें हैं और इतनी सारी डाइवर्सिटी है इंडिया में कि उस सारी चीजों को टच बेस करने के लिए सर्टेनली एक एपेक्स लेवल की ऑर्गेनाइजेशन चाहिए।
बिल्कुल।
तो मतलब अब ये कि सब्जेक्ट वैरायटी बहुत है, फेडरल स्ट्रक्चर्स हैं इंडिया में, तो मतलब हाउ द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन वर्क्स एक एट द एंटायर नेशन लेवल, तो थोड़ा सा उसके बारे में बताएं, ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के बारे में। यू वर्क देयर, तो मतलब कैसे इस तरह की चीजों को डील करती है। स्टेट के कुछ स्पेसिफिक इश्यूज हैं तो दे कैन आस्क नीति आयोग टू डू द रिसर्च, और व्हाट इज द प्रोसेस अगर क्योंकि हर चीज सेंट्रल से ही गवर्न है या स्टेट भी अपनी कुछ रिसर्च कर सकता है, ऐसा भी प्रोसेस हो सकता है क्या?
So, I mean, not that I'm the best person to comment on how the processes are, but I can give you my experience of the last couple of years that I was there. I think a lot has also evolved at NITI Aayog in a very positive way over time. So earlier, like you said, it was the planning commission. The 5-year plans used to be brought out, and even in that era, as TERI, we would interact for the formulation of 5-year plans. And in a sense, planning commission used to coordinate the different ministries in terms of their insights, and then the 5-year plans would be made. I think in today's era and time, while bringing together the ministries and amalgamating the directions is important. जो चीज बदल गई है, that is also the need to direct and be able to reach out to the states where the action has to be. So that center state kind of interaction has become a need which is imminent. Given that NITI Aayog is now the apex body of and with the Prime Minister as the head. And also there's a Prime Minister Council when it comes to climate change, and NITI is the think tank, the apex think tank body.
Yes.
I think that is the change, that it's being seen as a think tank which is to do its own thinking as well, its own research as well. And the time I was there, I was happy that I was able to contribute to seeding the modeling work there and taking that forward. NITI already had the India Energy Security Scenarios platform that it posted on the website, but we also brought in other integrated models on energy sector, which were started getting developed within NITI Aayog to look deeper into the kind of technological shifts which could happen in the energy sector, what investments would be needed for it, what were the cost optimization kind of differences that you could get because of following different pathways. So it was a more integrated structure for doing that. Also, NITI was already running the India Energy Modeling Forum, which also got further transformed into the India Climate and Energy Modeling Forum.
Yes.
So again, I think because of the changes that we are seeing, which are necessary, the need to integrate climate and energy, I think became and is very necessary. There are already implications of changing temperature, precipitation patterns, which are going to impact different regions of the country. It's going to impact the energy sector in terms of how the hydrological flows might change, in terms of what people's demands might be because of the need for more air conditioning, how the peak loads might go up, and how you need to again respond to that in terms of planning for your demand management. You need to cut across so many other things. And then as soon as we start having these targets at a national level, they're good. But finally, you have to implement those in the states. How do the states start making sense of how much to do, when, where? I think that again needs a connect with somebody to coordinate this, but at the same time, leaving the flexibility within the states. So the second thing which also happened during this time at NITI, which I think is extremely important, is the setting up of these state units or state support mission,
Yes.
Which brought in a lot of, I think, capacity building into the states, which is looking at now working very closely with the states, looking at the aspirations of various districts in terms of how they can contribute to economic growth, what are the kinds of activities which can pan out in each state, because every state has its own very different kind of fabric.
Absolutely.
Very different social structures, very different economic opportunities, and very different resource endowments. So what will work better in one state is not what will work in the other state. So tying that all up and looking at enhancing the abilities of the states or cities also to look at how they contribute to this larger goal at the national level, but also how to build roadmaps for their own self and contribute to sort of a joint decision making is, I think, something which is extremely needed and which again is has now been taken up by NITI Aayog in a big way. So I think we are headed in very much the right direction, either in terms of the connect between the center and the states becoming stronger, and also in terms of the connects across the economic dimension of growth, the social dimension of livelihoods, jobs, looking at what people need, and the dimension of decarbonization, because none of these can work in isolation. They need to all be working together to look at how we achieve our objectives of decarbonization as well as growth.
Climate and energy are intertwined, that's for sure. But when we look at energy as a subject, it's a concurrent subject. So state would have its own policies, state would have its own prerogative on whatever policy is being rolled out by the at a national level. But when it comes to climate, we have nationally determined contribution, NDC is set up, but there's nothing called a state determined contribution. So how does it roll up? What role does states play when it comes to climate part of this entire equation? And is there any plan on making states accountable for the work that they are doing in this space, in the climate space particularly, and how would it impact the NDCs?
So again, I mean, I don't see a need for every state necessarily having its own SDCs, as you would call them, but having a roadmap helps. So if you know where you might be headed, what your priorities are, how you can better align them, and it also makes a little bit of greater clarity to investors in terms of seeing where they might go and what the opportunities are. So I think it's important for states to have roadmaps, and to that extent some states have started bringing out their own net zero plans and so on. So but trying to break up something like an NDC into state development plans, I don't think is the way to go. Having said that, tracking what is happening at different levels across different sectors, I think is necessary and becoming more and more important, because again, with the change in the requirements at a national level in terms of our reporting to UNFCCC and working in a globalized environment when it comes to climate change. Earlier we used to have the NatComs, the National Communication Reports, and the VORs, and now we have shifted to what is called the BTR, the transparency requirements coming in. So wherein you have to explain and quantify each bit of what you have achieved or where you are progressing. If you didn't have this, at a granular level, and you were not monitoring this at a granular level, it becomes very difficult, obviously, at the national level to say what has been achieved by what. So the whole process of inventory, the whole process of monitoring, reporting in these documents has become and is going to increasingly become more data intensive. And therefore, again, having common kind of frameworks to also collate this data to be able to understand and explain and even share. I mean, I think when something has worked in a particular state, how do you share it with another state and expect it to work if you don't have some commonalities and frameworks, so or data templates and so on? So there, I think again the state action plans are something which have been there for a long time. The MOEF has a framework by which these are done for all the states, and it's been done for all the states, and some are now being revised again. But it provides a common framework for states to put forward their action plans. So in a way, there has been some way of looking at where everybody is progressing. I think as time goes by, we are looking at greater granularity and more data accuracy in how we are doing these actions and moving across states and districts.
मैम इसमें जैसे स्टेट्स पे और थोड़ा बात करते हैं. So maybe I think you have mentioned climate action plan. जैसे states wise state climate action plans बने हैं और जो MOEF से ड्राइव है और मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ पावर की तरफ से स्टेट एनर्जी एफिशिएंसी एक्शन प्लान बने हैं. सारे स्टेट्स के एक्शन प्लान्स अलग अलग भी बने हुए हैं, है ना मैम? तो अब इस वाले केस में क्या है कि मतलब द क्वेश्चन इज हाउ मच हैंड होल्डिंग इट इज रिक्वायर्ड फॉर द स्टेट्स टू मे बी आई थिंक स्टार्ट वर्किंग ऑन दोज एक्शन प्लान्स. उसका रीजन भी है कि कुछ स्टेट्स तो फॉरवर्ड लुकिंग है, अपने आप आगे बढ़ जाते हैं. कुछ स्टेट्स मे बी आई थिंक दे हैव देयर ओन अदर चैलेंजेस व्हिच दे नीड टू एड्रेस देमसेल्व्स एज अ प्रायोरिटी. अब उसका रीजन भी है, जैसे हमारे यहाँ पे अगर मैं एक स्पेसिफिक डेटा या रिपोर्ट में पढ़ रहा था तो उसमें है कि मतलब वी हैव अ पर कैपिटा इनकम व्हिच वाज 1 lakh in 2011. In 2021 और 22 it reached to 2 lakh, ऑलमोस्ट डबल हो गई. पर स्टेट्स का अगर कंपैरिजन करें तो मे बी द पुअर स्टेट वर्सेस रिच स्टेट जो है वो 1:6 या 1:5 के आसपास है. इसका मतलब है कि जो 2 लाख है वो तो एक एवरेज नंबर पे है, बट स्टिल मे बी सम स्टेट्स हैव मे बी हाई पर कैपिटा इनकम, द अदर स्टेट्स हैव अ वेरी लो पर कैपिटा इनकम. और ज्यादातर केसेस में इकोनॉमिक जो मे बी डाइवर्सिटी है इट लीड्स टू मे बी अदर सच इम्प्लीमेंटेशंस लाइक एनर्जी एफिशिएंसी, क्लाइमेट चेंज. तो इस तरह के केसेस में भी लोगों को जनरली, जैसे आपने भी बताया कि यू ऑल्सो हैव वर्कड हाउ मे बी आई थिंक इंटीग्रेशन इज इम्पॉर्टेंट. सो इंटीग्रेशन के लिए इम्पॉर्टेंट है कि कहीं ना कहीं लोगों को समझाना कि अगर डाइवर्सिटी, लेट्स से इकोनॉमिक डाइवर्सिटी की तरफ देखें, जिसके पास में एक मे बी परचेसिंग पावर बेहतर है, दे विल ऑलवेज परचेज बेटर एफिशिएंट इक्विपमेंट और अप्लायंसेस लेट अस से. तो इस तरह से वो कोरिलेट कर सकते हैं. तो स्टेट्स को हैंड होल्ड करना और कब तक करना is मतलब what is your perspective in this case?
Okay, so let me break that answer into two parts.
Please.
When you say states को क्या करें और दूसरा है economic growth हो सकता है along with moving towards decarbonization or other options. So I think even at a national level, the need for coming together of the thinking of the economic growth part, or what we are calling Viksit Bharat, and the path to decarbonization or net zero. इनमें तालमेल होना, understanding होना is to me supreme.
Absolutely.
Because you could have a decarbonization pathway which is not aligned well to the social needs or the economic needs, and then I would not call it a good decarbonization pathway. But that's not what we want. We want Viksit Bharat at the same time as needing a path towards net zero. So equal importance, I think, needs to be paid in terms of thinking which strategies we must choose, which fuels, which technologies, what paths. And it's not an easy answer, but I think every bit of every option that you start looking at needs to be evaluated well enough in terms of all these multiple objectives. then at the state level, some objective may be more important than the other. And that's where at the state level we can begin to think differently as to यहाँ पे हमारा social structure कैसा है, हमारा economic activity कैसी है, where are the things that we can, tap the opportunities. So at one end we are talking about challenges कि ये मुश्किल है, हाँ मुश्किल है, but at the same time we should talk about this as an opportunity. Because you can convert that challenge into an opportunity if you are thinking well enough कि हम इससे अपना employment बढ़ा सकते हैं क्या हम इससे किसी section of society की incomes बढ़ा सकते हैं, can we get into other avenues which may lead us towards a higher export potential, can we increase the competitiveness of our industries in some way. बहुत सी ऐसी चीजें हैं जो हम achieve कर सकते हैं by doing something which is also bringing us decarbonization, but they will differ from where you do it, which one you do and how you do it, and whether you need to bring in complementary policies, what complementary policies, and so on. So I think that's where I would like to say that, at the state level, again, multiple departments will need to work together. And again, the capacity building is a big need. So when you said handholding कब तक करनी पड़ेगी और कब छोड़ना पड़ेगा, handholding करनी I think ज़रूरी है. I don't have an answer of कब छोड़ सकते हैं, but I think it is important to engage at the state level with multiple departments, but also see every issue in a consolidated way. And therefore, when states are making roadmaps, I think that roadmap is not a one defined path. It should talk about a flexible path or a set of scenarios where you could do different things and they could give you different turning points at different junctures based on how the progress has been. Because very often you don't even know how much the progress might be. In the past, we never thought कि solar के costs ऐसे गिर जाएंगे. At the same time, we thought nuclear could have gone faster. CCUS, we thought would never evolve. It has still not evolved. So I think different things, go at different pace and at different scales. And we have to leave that flexibility in the system. So that is one thing which, we should keep in mind. And again, we do scenario building as well and have done that for a long time. Looking at second best options often may be a good option in these kind of scenarios. So when we use, for example, what are called cost optimization models, it will give you the best solution, right? Which is the least cost. But is that the best is true from that particular model boundary? If you bring in multiple objectives and you start looking at, does it speak to lesser air pollution? Does it speak to better health? Does it speak to better industrial competitiveness? Maybe you would change your first best and pick up the second best. So I think looking at a multitude of different kinds of frameworks to make your decision is again something which is evolving and needs to come into the space. And that I think is again an important perspective, whether it is at the national level or at the state level.
So, with so many moving parts, what would you say? What portion of this entire modeling exercise at a national or state level is art, and what portion of it is science?
Well, I think it's both an art and a science, of course.
That's for sure.
That's for sure. But just to throw in a humorous anecdote there. So one has had in one's team chemical engineers, other mechanical engineers, economists, sociologists, and at various points in time when one was speaking to engineers, no offense to engineers, one would get a very specific answer on a kind of efficiency improvement possibility or a process shift. But for engineers, I think it's always a black and white.
Right.
In the lab, if this is what efficiency you can get, that's the number that you will be given. But for your whole stock or for what will happen on ground, it's obviously going to be a very different number. So that is where the art comes in. And very often, therefore, I would tell my engineer who would give me this number, whatever, say it was 10, I would say, okay, I'm halving it 5. Right? So, I mean, I'm not saying that's, always the best thing to do.
Sure.
But sometimes you have to look at the gray areas. And these gray areas are not just because of your whims and fancies. They are because the social structures are such. They are because, the behavior is such, and so on. Will everybody tomorrow change to a certain technology? No. I mean, there's one issue about price and, how the techno-economics pans out. But there's another thing about, your affordability of upfront costs, your preference for a certain thing, and so on, which will often and always stay. There you need other nudges. You want to get to the maximum, and what can these other nudges be to change behavior becomes equally important at some stage, but is not purely going to be technologically driven to make you achieve the lab scale efficiency for your whole stock or your whole society or whatever. So that is where I think the modeling of the needs to play a role, both as a science and an art. But having said that, again, the more detailed your model, the more granular your model, the better the output is going to be. So it's again the garbage in, garbage out kind of philosophy. A model is just a representation of what you put in, right? So I mean, if you're going to have it extremely coarse, you won't be able to see half the issues. And for example, now if I look at the power sector, with the kind of changes we are beginning to see, it's not a past trends continued, right? So earlier you could look at data, maybe when things were not changing so fast, look at a 30-year period, statistically, econometrically, do your regressions, get a path, and that's likely to be more or less correct. Today with the evolution, I mean, even sitting here, I think all of us would agree, the cooling demands are becoming so high. The purchase of air conditioners is becoming so high. The climate is changing. The temperatures are changing. People are moving from not having air conditioners to having many more, and this is going to result in a peak. We are seeing a peak, right? So how do you firstly put this peak into your model? Do you look at it 15-minutely, or do you look at it for a season? Can make a whole lot of difference to your understanding of how much of solar or thermal you need, how can the peak be met in a rigorous way. So the granularity of the models, the data needed for the models needs to be much more to give you more precise understanding and how to go forward. So that is definitely, I think, the science part of what needs to be done to get a better precision or a better understanding of where you want
art
to see.
तुम्हारे ऊपर है.
Yes.
मैम, जैसे policy landscape आपने term लिया, and then you also have mentioned one specific domain, cooling. What are the other specific, I think based on the specific data that has been maybe visualized based on maybe I think for last 10 years, let's say, एक दशक में जितना भी हमने data देखा, and then track the data impact, some policies बनी. Cooling as a sector है जो कि बहुत ही visibly critical sector है.
Correct.
Apart from the cooling, what are the other specific sectors जहाँ पे हमें लगता है कि they need to be addressed, maybe I think without delaying it much?
So one of the big elephants in the room is data centers. We don't have a very good understanding of how that need for energy in data centers is going to evolve. And to that extent, I think most people leave it out.
बहुत ज़्यादा तेजी से बन रहे हैं.
बहुत ज़्यादा तेजी. So like I said, things are changing in certain ways where how we used to do things in the past is no longer how you will need to do this in the future. And that's where I think, again, futuristic things like AI, etc., will help us in looking at methods to bring this in, because you don't have 30 years of past data to look at what will happen in the future,
Absolutely.
right? So you need different algorithms for that. But yeah, I mean, those are challenges.
So data center एक हो गया, cooling एक हो गया.
Yeah. So again, technology-wise, how things might change in terms of the costs of various technologies, there are huge uncertainties. If you look at CCUS, CCS in particular, do we even have the ability to sequester carbon? And technologically, is that viable? Are we sure it won't come out of the ground or from under the sea and escape out into the air at some point in time? I think the certainty is not there. CCU, we are starting to see pilots. Don't know how much uptake there can be. So there are huge uncertainties associated with some of the technologies. SMRs are being talked about in nuclear. I mean, again, we've talked of nuclear scaling up and the need for nuclear. Now we have a 100 gigawatt goal as well. But which of the technologies will evolve to what scale? That is fairly uncertain. So both in terms of costs and in terms of the scalability and how the pilots go ahead. Green hydrogen, again, something we've tried to push. And we are looking at a 5MT target right now. But again, how quickly will the costs come down? How will the scalability be, and so on? So that is where I said there's a fair bit of uncertainty about several things. And models can only help you look at scenarios, question the what ifs, and give you a kind of a vision of where things might land 20, 30, 40 years into the future. But more directed roadmaps are always useful for the shorter term, medium term, to be able to see how to go forward and what role different policies can play, how to nudge via various policies, and how to bring in complementary policies to steer towards a direction or a goal that you've set in your roadmap.
Very nice.
A continuation to that. So, what level of impact does belief in a particular technology at the very topmost level have on the deployment and adoption of any particular technology? So if we look at LEDs, for example, Ujala was a great example. Nobody ever thought that we would be able to bring down the cost of LEDs to such a level. But there was a push from the top leadership that this needs to be done. And despite resistance from probably the end consumer, we still were able to meet the pricing targets, which nobody in the world even thought of. So what kind of leadership push behind a particular technology is required, and what is the impact of that?
मैम इसमें एक aligned question भी है, मतलब I think just a thought की जैसे हमने we have also seen the progression of different and diverse technology adoptions. For example, Ujala, Ankur ne बताया, renewable energy, we have seen growing adoption at maybe I think at the bigger level, plant level, as well as at the small scale level, जहाँ पे हम लोग farmers की भी बात कर रहे हैं, जहाँ हम लोग individual homes की बात कर रहे हैं. और जब हम लोग energy efficiency की बात करते हैं तो वो अपने आप में एक challenge बन जाता है. And the fact is कि all these technology adoptions, they cost a lot, whereas the maybe behavioral based जो savings हो सकती हैं, they cost nothing. Still they are very hard to get implemented.
Right.
So मतलब that is also one of the things. अब वो leadership की तरफ से अगर push होगा तो that is always maybe I think a meaningful agenda for people to fulfill. But consumer behavior भी एक ऐसा component है जो शायद एक enforcement mechanism से हो जाए तो बहुत अच्छा है, but it's very unlikely.
Right.
मतलब what is your perspective?
आपने leadership की बात कही कि it comes from the top. I would not call it a belief. I would term it as a desire, but a desire which has been thought about, right? So and I mentioned like a second best alternatives. So I think when we are talking about the LEDs, cost high tha, but the efficiency potential was something which would bring you a fraction less than what your normal incandescent bulb or tube light would have done. Right? So immediately we could see कि gains बहुत ज़्यादा होंगे, because at that time we were also at a position where lot of people did not have access to electricity. तो जब आपको अपने डेवलपमेंट के लिए आपको एक्सेस देना है, वो बढ़ावा आपको करना ही करना है, and you are seeing a growth path where you have a market and you could use that market to bring down the costs. I think it was a fairly well thought kind of a direction, which turned into a belief or a desire, whatever you might want to call it, and which then played up very well with the strategic direction in terms of how to create these aggregated demands, work with the manufacturers, bring down the costs, and achieve the scales. So I think this was one of the very good success stories. Yeah. And again, some of these demand aggregation kind of measures can help in maybe other things, including green hydrogen, jaise hum abhi baat kar rahe hain. We are talking about a small bit, but we're trying to create a demand in some of the industry sectors to say, be the takers for this, right? You're mandating something. So again, if there can be an aggregation which can help to bring down the costs. So right now, again, at that time, those bulbs were not the least cost option. Sure. Green hydrogen today is not the least cost option. But we are choosing these because of the other factors which are equally important or fairly important to us in our growth path. And that's where I say, looking at multiple objectives together is becoming important to sometimes overrule the first best alternative. Having said that, again, you have to be cautious. Yeah. So, I mean, you can overrule every other objective. Like I mentioned, CCS, it is high cost, but do we go full force and already have a target to have so much CCS at that point in time? Maybe no. Maybe we should wait and watch a bit. So I mean, there are phases to what you can do or should do. Maybe at this point, the research development side needs to be looked at. Once you are through with that phase, you look at piloting. Yeah. Once your pilots are successful, you start looking at, on-ground commercial viability, and then you can start having some targets. So I think everything needs to have a way of also timing it as to what are you putting onto the consumer as something which is mandated, and what is it that you are still keeping within the labs, what is it that you are providing direction in terms of trying to incubate it towards commercialization. And that is where I think the role of the policymaker comes in terms of judging which bit to take onto which of these tracks. So I think these are informed decisions which require deep research, which require a multitude of studies, and which require looking at it from different and multiple objectives. It could be, providing you benefits in terms of local environmental considerations. Could you be providing you employment opportunities? So again, how do you bring that all together? Not an easy answer, but I think that is where you need to look at the policy side.
Very nice. मैम, जैसे सिनेरियो एनालिसिस आप टर्म कई बार यूज कर चुकी हैं, तो जनरली जब भी हम लोग इस तरह की मॉडलिंग की बात करते हैं, तो यू ऑल्सो हैव मेंशन्ड फर्स्ट ऑप्शन की बजाय सेकंड बेस्ट ऑप्शन इज मे बी आई थिंक ज़्यादा सुटेबल रहता है. तो so maybe I think when we look at the energy transition, so maybe sometimes the aggregation may work as a one scenario. Second, maybe incentive may work. The third, maybe the demand from the consumer side may work. So generally, मतलब from the government या policy in a maybe enforcement perspective से देखा जाए, so maybe what is the role of the awareness that comes into the picture? So उसको adoption करना है, उसके लिए cost एक component है, बट उसको अवेयरनेस भी एक कंपोनेंट है. समटाइम्स ही मे चूज द maybe I think a costly option, but it may last longer. Sometimes he may or she may choose the maybe I think a cost effective option which may last little less. So मतलब इस तरह के पर्सपेक्टिव्स को भी हम लोग ध्यान रखते हैं, या रूरल अर्बन को देखते हैं, सेमी अर्बन देखते हैं. मतलब व्हाट आर द सिनेरियोज, कितने सिनेरियोज पॉसिबल हैं इस तरह के नंबर क्रंचिंग में?
So I mean, let me explain this a little differently from a
Policy
slightly
perspective.
modeling perspective.
Okay.
So I mean, there are different kinds of models. ये जो मॉडल्स हम फॉर एग्जांपल एनडीसी के लिए यूज करेंगे, जिसमें हम सिनेरियो बनाएंगे कि वेयर would the emission intensity sort of targets fall, and what could happen if you move to different technologies. They come out of these least cost optimization models or other simulation models, etc., where you're looking only at energy modules and cost optimization. There could be other kind of models which are system dynamics models, which help you evaluate policy in terms of ये policy करी तो क्या होगा, वो policy करी तो क्या होगा. And those are better at looking at the feedbacks to different things like employment and so on. Then there are other macroeconomic models, or what are called computable general equilibrium models, which look at the economic implications. कि GDP पे क्या असर पड़ जाएगा, या inequality पे क्या असर पड़ेगा, रूरल अर्बन में शिफ्ट्स में क्या होगा, सेक्टोरल शिफ्ट्स में क्या होगा, आपकी ग्रोथ जो है वो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग ड्रिवन रहेगी या उस पर इम्पैक्ट पड़ जाएगा. तो using these different kinds of models as complementary things give you different insights. So no one model is good, no one model can generate all the scenarios and give you the complete picture, which is why it's also important to bring in multiple perspectives from different kinds of analysts, modelers, policymakers, decision scientists, and sort of look at picking the large messages from there and trying to tie them together. Again, these are all directional. Number doesn't jump out and should not be taken as a deterministic value to try and achieve, because these are all scenarios which are saying agar X number of assumptions हुए तो ये होएगा. But these are all assumptions. They may or may not work all in unison. They may not all work in the way that you have assumed. So there can be a fair amount of uncertainty. But these are good as directions because they help you to at least filter out कि कौन सी चीज आपको ज़्यादा बैंग फॉर द बक दे सकती है, हाँ, किसमें ज़्यादा पोटेंशियल है, किसमें शॉर्ट टर्म पोटेंशियल है, किसमें लॉन्ग टर्म पोटेंशियल है, किसमें सिर्फ एक तरह का बेनिफिट है, किसमें मल्टीपल बेनिफिट्स हैं. सो आई थिंक ब्रिंगिंग ऑल ऑफ दैट टुगेदर is what is required for good decision making.
हम किसी में मान लीजिए कि based on the option that gets selected उसको रोल आउट कर दिया गया और फिर रोल आउट के टाइम पे वो इम्प्लीमेंटेशन सही से नहीं हो पाया और उसमें गैप्स विजिबल हो गए, तो मतलब what is the strategy in terms of bringing the pivot or rolling back?
So again, as you said, the roadmaps need to have flexibility because we don't know how technologies might evolve, and therefore you go in small steps as you go along the way. पहले
छोटे स्केल पे कर लीजिए,
छोटे स्केल पे पायलट्स किए, उसको देखा लोकल कॉन्टेक्स्ट में how it's working. Once you have tried and tested, you replicate it in a similar setting, in a different setting. There'll be learnings, right? And once you know that it's working in different settings, you can scale up. I think that's precisely how India has and is progressing. If we're looking at the green hydrogen mission, that's how we are starting as a small thing. But I think the benefits could be large, given that we have a large resource in renewable energy in India. If we can make green hydrogen from renewables, if we can scale it up, if the cost of storage can come down, if that is going to be our big bet, if we can scale up nuclear as well, vagera. Electricity is much, much cleaner than the other fossils, right? So if your electricity is renewable or clean energy based, and then you're generating green hydrogen from it, and the industries can then benefit from it, if that whole hydrogen economy thing goes ahead, then I think there's an opportunity not only to scale it up for the Indian domestic market, but also for the global market. So why not? I mean, in that sense, trying to look at the multiple ways and bringing it into your strategy, I think is a important and relevant decision.
Yeah, very nice.
I think the same thing happens also with renewables. I think way back with the National Action Plan on Climate Change, that was 2008-9.
8-9 long back.
8-9. That's when the national mission on national solar mission was set up. Right at that point, what kind of a scale did we have in solar? Practically nothing. 2 gigawatt bhi nahi tha ya jo bhi tha, and we came up with a 20 gigawatt at that time. Today we are crossing 100, right? So I mean, again, thinking about it at that time, obviously it was not the cheapest solution, but we knew the potential was there. The technology seemed to be picking up. It was out of the labs, it was on the ground. So again, I think from a strategy point of view, decision makers need to be looking at these things a little more strategically. And that is where I think India has played it well so far, and I think is continuing to play it well. We have lots of options, we have lots of opportunities. I think we are good to go if we keep on at the same track.
That's a great segue to my next question, ma'am. So as somebody who's trying to build a company in the energy sector, which is not the most lucrative sector to build companies in, what would be your piece of advice to entrepreneurs like me and multiple other entrepreneurs who are working in the
Well, I've never tried that myself, so what kind of advice can I give? But I think the energy sector is something which is seeing a lot of change and is therefore is full of opportunities. Whether it is by way of technologies, whether it is by way of data, in terms of what kind of data is required and how it can be used by multiple people. I think again, with the advent of AI, machine learning, etc., we are going to see a change. So how can we use that change for the better? And I mean, our constant problem with regard to visualizing how much energy efficiency can happen, for example, in the domestic households, relates to being able to understand how people use or could use appliances in the future. So if we had better data on that and we could get it to people, that itself is, so much of a use that it can bring in much detailed understanding and insights into because we're all making guesses about usage patterns, right?
Ma'am, in terms of, let's say, I think कुछ समय पहले हमारे ऑनरेबल कॉमर्स मिनिस्टर सर पीयूष गोयल जी ने ऑल्सो मेंशन किया कि जैसे हमारे यहाँ पे R&D या रिसर्च एंड डेवलपमेंट का इकोसिस्टम थोड़ा सा मतलब अलाइनमेंट उसका कम है. People have more profit-oriented maybe businesses, which may be people-centric or demography-centric. लेकिन जो रिसर्च एंड डेवलपमेंट के लिए जो इकोसिस्टम चाहिए उसकी थोड़ी सी कमी है. And then people in general should be basically aligned for such investment also. Businesses उसमें भी build करने की ज़रूरत है. जब हम लोग एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन एज ए सेक्टर देखते हैं, वहाँ पे इस तरह की चीज़ें मुझे लगता है कि रिक्वायरमेंट आई हैं. Already there are so many things. You mentioned CCUS, you mentioned hydrogen, and there are other technologies available. But जब consumer behavior perspectives देखते हैं, for example, there are a lot of codes and standards for efficiency particularly let's say energy efficiency or in buildings or in other specific areas, they मुझे लगता है कि वो implement हुए हैं, but जो impact आना चाहिए वो नहीं आ रहा है। और उसका एक स्पेसिफिक रीजन भी है कि शायद हमें लगता है कि स्टेट्स लेवल पे जो डिस्कनेक्ट है फ्रॉम मे बी आई थिंक डिपार्टमेंट टू डिपार्टमेंट का कम्युनिकेशन सही से नहीं होना, या कोई और चीज सेंटर से जो गाइडेंस है वो अवेलेबिलिटी सही से नहीं होना, वट एवर द रीजंस आर। बट टेक्नोलॉजी में या इस तरह की जो पॉलिसी है जहाँ पे हमें लगता है कि मास स्केल में लोगों का अडॉप्शन होना है फ्रॉम द ह्यूमन अडॉप्शन या एनर्जी एफिशिएंसी अडॉप्शन पर्सपेक्टिव, R&D का रोल कुछ हो सकता है क्या? बिकॉज ज्यादातर केसेस में मतलब एज यू हैव आल्सो मेंशन्ड बिफोर वी वर गेटिंग इनटू दिस डिस्कशन कि मतलब लेवल पे डेटा अवेलेबल नहीं होता है, जब डेटा होता है तो वो कुछ और बोलता है, बट मतलब अगर वो सेंटर से एक पॉलिसी निकली है तो हर एक स्टेट और हर एक जगह पे अलग अलग तरीके से उसको होना चाहिए। तो मतलब वो जो रिसर्च कंपोनेंट है, व्हाट इज योर पर्सपेक्टिव कि वो मिसिंग है या हम लोग कहीं मिस्टेक कर रहे हैं, या is there any other maybe alternate option that can be brought in?
If you look at R&D spend by itself, India in general has a low R&D spend. I think around 1% or something of our GDP, as compared to other developing countries, developed countries जहाँ पे 4-5% हो जाता है. So definitely I would say R&D पे spend करना increase होना जरूरी है. We should spend more on it. There are some progressive things. For example, abhi, I think a lot of tilt is being towards the Atal Tinkering Labs and IITs वगैरह में. There's a bigger connect between academia, industry, government, which is where a push is being tried to be given to startups, to R&D at small levels, to try everything. I think that's a very good move. So and a very desirable move to get young people engaged into trying out various things. And one thing which has stuck with me, I don't know at what point it was, but at some point I think just before I joined NITI, Mr. Amitabh Kant at some fora mentioned that we should be ready for failure. And we should not feel bad if we fail.
Absolutely.
Every failure is a learning.
No, बिल्कुल, हम as an entrepreneur हमें लगता है कि failure actually is very important for us to learn.
It's a better teacher.
So that struck me that day, and it has stayed with me for all this while. And I think that is where trying these numerous opportunities and trying the numerous options at a technological R&D stage, but also at a business model stage is equally important. टेक्नोलॉजी हो सकता है आपके पास हो, बट वो इस रीजन में कैसे काम करेगी, उस रीजन में कैसे काम करेगी, इस टाइप ऑफ कम्युनिटी के साथ कैसे काम करेगी, उस कम्युनिटी के साथ कैसे काम करेगी. एवरीथिंग नीड्स टू हैव अ डिफरेंट बिजनेस मॉडल. बट अनलेस वी ट्राई इट, अनलेस वी go there, unless we sort of look at what the challenges are and try to solve that particular challenge, it's not going to happen. So to stay aloof and expect miracles to happen is not the way that it's going to go ahead, according to me. We'll have to look at a lot of research also on the soft social side as well as on the technological side to see how to make things work. And therein I think there's a lot of work to be done. So your question earlier on what kind of insight one might have for energy companies, I think there's lots. There's just so much to do that any number of new companies which come in will never be short of work.
Lot of work. कुछ काम एक्चुअली किया भी नहीं गया ज्यादा. सोशल साइड पे तो बहुत ज्यादा काम मुझे लगता है पेंडिंग है ही है.
I mean, if you're looking at and we do want to move away quicker towards renewables, but if you're going to slowly phase down our coal, what about the regions which are right now dependent on the coal economy? So you have to think about the social setup, the economic setup of those regions, reskilling, retraining, looking at other economic activities which could come there. So I mean, all of that requires research as well, which is the soft research. Technologically, you might look at, repurposing the mines or looking at something else which requires technological things. So I think, again, there's lots to do, whatever arena you pick up.
One more thing that comes to my mind. One is, let's say you mentioned tracking of the, maybe when you implement a policy, then there is a tracking mechanism which gives you कि जो policy implement हुई है वो perform कैसे कर रही है. In our experience, there are again maybe I think other things also which needs to be tracked. So for example, maybe I think we would need your perspective on this. कि जैसे for example, maybe when we look at the climate change, we look at the energy efficiency, we look at the renewable energy, there are a lot of overlapping also. Not on these, but overlapping specific areas. And there is a fund flow which basically asks for different policy push. और उस पॉलिसीज को सेंट्रल से बन के और फिर स्टेट से पहुंचती हैं. इसीलिए बहुत सारे जगह पे क्या है कि मे बी जो उसका आउटकम है वो बहुत ज़्यादा मतलब इम्पैक्टफुल नहीं होता है, बिकॉज शायद वो कन्वर्ज हो करके एक साथ नहीं लोग काम कर रहे हैं, या पॉलिसीज जो है वो एक साथ इम्पैक्ट लाने के बजाय अलग अलग लेवल पे काम कर रही हैं. मुझे लगता है अगर कन्वर्ज होकर के काम करें तो शायद इट में ब्रिंग द आउटपुट और आउटकम मच सूनर. व्हाट इज योर पर्सपेक्टिव?
Yeah, completely agree with you. I think that's where I mentioned the complementarity of policies which is required. So a single policy may be able to do X, but definitely if you put two more supportive policies, it just magnifies the kind of outcome that you might be able to get. So I think complementarity of policies is also a very important aspect in upscaling and accelerating action. But earlier you also mentioned efficiency and behavior. So I think that also, and that's something which comes cheap. When you say cheap, yes, in terms of money, cheap, but expensive in terms of very difficult to implement. So I think while individuals need to be nudged, and we have Mission Life, which seeks to do just that, and which again I think is seen as something which needs to be scaled up at the global level. I think as Indians, we are by nature frugal, and we have not been into that culture of excess consumption or wastage, but remaining that way in the future and bringing in as much as we can on circularity, being less wasteful, and making sure that our material resources are other resources are not compromised as we develop is extremely important. So again, in terms of efficiency at a technological level, we've had the PAT scheme, where 6 cycles are already over, and I think we've done very well in terms of being able to tap the designated consumers and reach a higher level of energy efficiency improvement, which also played a great role in reducing energy and emissions along the line. Again, the PAT scheme is envisaged to transform into the CCTS scheme, which would now look at emissions rather than energy intensity. So that's again in the correct direction in terms of moving towards the NDCs and the net zero trajectories. But additionally, bringing in behavioral change to the extent possible through Mission Life can add on even more in terms of what kind of efficiency improvements we can bring in. That said, in fact, we are right now doing a study for Ministry of Power and Bureau of Energy Efficiency for the Life mission, and looking at what are the kinds of things which can be done. Some of the nudges, or what you might call behavioral change, may be easy to do at an individual level, and we call it no cost. But there, in the system, there is a cost. So just an example, if we look at public transportation, we should be using public transportation, but how accessible it is, how convenient it is, etc. How far it is the metro station from
last mile connectivity.
Those are still challenges which deter a fair number of people from getting onto public transport. But bringing in those connectivities at a higher level will, of course, incur costs, right? So, and there are many challenges associated with it. So I mean, looking at the problem as a whole is a larger problem than just a nudge. And therefore, the way you develop infrastructure, the way you bring in, as I was talking about, the business model of how to make things workable is equally important while trying to target the individual. So therein, I think there are many instances where people may be nudged, but the need for complementary measures and the need for other supporting infrastructure sometimes, supporting policies sometimes, or supporting technologies or options that need to be put in place to enhance that individual behavior shift.
Yeah, I mean, it's so exciting. There are so many moving parts, and you can possibly never think about all of them, like productivity losses when you are stuck in traffic. As a nation, the amount of productivity that we are losing, it's significant, but how do we mitigate that with better transportation, better...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One more thing, let's say you mentioned mission life. अब उसमें जैसे दो पर्सपेक्टिव हैं, एक तो बिहेवियर पर्सपेक्टिव है विच इज द फोकस. इस तरह के केसेस में इसका जो इम्पैक्ट एनालिसिस है वो चैलेंजिंग भी लगता है, बिकॉज द होल कंट्री इज ऑल्सो ऑन द ग्रोथ पाथ ट्रेजेक्ट्री वेयर पीपल विल हैव अ बेटर परचेजिंग पावर. तो कोई मतलब दे विल ऑल्सो रिक्वायर मोर कंफर्ट, एज यू ऑल्सो मेंशन कूलिंग एज ए मेन चैलेंज आएगा. और ऑल्दो लोगों को एनर्जी यूसेज कम करने की सलाह मिशन लाइफ में जरूर है, बट लोगों को ये भी लगता है कि व्हेन दे हैव द मनी टू स्पेंड दे सर्टेनली कैन हैव at least the infrastructure should have to avail better comfort conditions.
Correct.
तो मतलब इस तरह की जो मिशन है उसकी सक्सेस या जो इम्पैक्ट एनालिसिस है उसका भी कोई मतलब प्रोसेस है इसका?
So again, I mean, there are studies, and like I mentioned, we are doing a study right now. But I mean, on this particular example that you said, my own individual thought is that if you're trying to reduce, ask people to change their behavior, to minimize the use of air conditioners, etc., or stop the wastage. There may be some challenges to the comfort level that somebody might desire, but definitely on the wastage part there can be policies or things which can nudge a person. So for example, if I were able to earn money by feeding the excess power back to the grid, if I had a solar rooftop, and therefore I'm getting a benefit or an incentive, I would be nudged into saying, okay, I'm getting earning from there, so why should I leave my AC on is waqt, let me use that. So I think those are the business models that one is talking about, which while giving you the comfort, or while giving you while not restricting your development objectives, allows you to also look at other ways to bring in more efficiency into the system. Rainwater harvesting, again, for example, when it doesn't directly come into energy, but it's an indirect way. If your groundwater table is higher, the water pumps that you would be using to pump up water, and all of us use water pumps to get our water into our houses, the energy used for that water pumping can reduce dramatically if everybody was getting into rainwater harvesting. But how many people actually do that? So there are many linkages which are outside the boundary of the energy sector directly, but a change in your water kind of options can make a difference to energy consumption as well. So looking at some of these nexus issues, being able to talk across ministries, across departments to bring in issues in on a common platform are again important. And at various points, we've seen that certain departments or certain ministries would have a certain focus because of the silo. And I think that's the silos that you want to break and work across when you have to solve these challenges. So that is extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I think it's a great conversation. And
My pleasure.
But I think the last round is our rapid fire round. So उसमें हम लोग कुछ question पूछते हैं, and then you have to just respond.
That seems like an exam.
Yes. So पहला question है कि मतलब specific what is the specific book or documentary which made you think about the climate or maybe energy efficiency? Any specific book which changed your thinking, although you were very much like aligned on that thought?
I think also as while being in TERI, I think we used to come out with these TerraView series. So that actually spoke to me a lot because I was a modeler and a little bit more into the national level policy analysis and other kinds of work. I was not so much in the field, but the rest of my colleagues were more in the field, and the stories they brought and the picturization that you saw, gave you a different kind of a impression. So you see more about the challenges on ground, and that is what sort of hits you more as to being able to understand the gravity of the problems and the variation in the issues. So whether they are water related challenges, whether they are food security challenges, or they are urban heat island kind of issues. So I mean there are these multiplicity of things which you don't think about directly when you're talking about the energy sector. But yeah, I mean those nexus issues exist. And yeah.
Ma'am, any specific technology after the Ujala or LED आपको लगता है कि it has a mass scale potential?
Yeah, I mean again I think right now I think green hydrogen probably might be the next thing to see scale. But that also depends on how RE storage in RE pans out.
Solar panel बात करें.
Yeah, solar panel. But right now, I mean, we are starting to see the hybrid, the solar, wind, and battery come together to be sort of at the same price as fossil-based electricity. But if that works and that's able to scale up, and we are able to move towards clean electricity, that's one way to go. But then also green hydrogen is potentially something that can scale up, because RE can give you clean electricity. It's the hard to abate industry and the hard to abate transport which stays as the big elephant in the room when you're trying to look at net zero. And for that, the only other alternative that I can think of right now is green hydrogen, which might see the light of day. So, and that need is very important according to me. So, because thermal energy and a clean source for thermal energy has to have an alternative.
One leader or thinker who inspires your work?
So, at this point in time, I would say I'm quite impressed with the government. So, yeah, so I think we are doing well. And I would say the Prime Minister is taking the country in terms of a really rapid and good growth path.
Prime Minister Modi.
Yes, so I think with the changes which are coming in,
very nice.
It's inspirational.
What is the non-negotiable habit for you? Sustainable habit. Any sustainable habit which is non-negotiable for you?
So like I said, one has been brought up and inculcated with these sustainability or frugality habits. So, I mean, yeah, definitely, not utilizing anything excessively in terms of switching off the lights or anything when it's not needed. So that's something which I would always do to prevent wastage of any kind of electricity, wastage of food, etc.
Okay.
So, yeah.
One city as an example which comes to your mind when you look at the climate action as a perspective?
As a success or a...
Yeah, as a success, or maybe I think both. Yeah.
Yeah, so as a success, I think most people would these days say Indore has worked well. But in terms of sort of worrying, I worry about the cities or actually all the regions which are in the mountainous areas. And again, TERI's recently set up the Institute for Himalayan Studies in the Northeast, where we are striving to look at what are the kinds of issues and risks specific to that region and try to solve those challenges. Again, with climate change, I think these are the most vulnerable regions. And with development, you need to look at ways in which you do not do harm to the already fragile landscape there. And, you address all the issues in its entirety, not stopping only at the energy sector, but also looking at the risks that might be there for agriculture, for livelihoods of people and for societies who are in that region.
Ma'am, अगर आप energy modeling expert या energy area में नहीं होती हैं, what would have been the alternate domain or path that you have?
I would probably have been a traveler. Yeah, I love to travel, meet people, see places. So maybe I would have had something to do with the travel business.
I was going to say an actress, but
that wouldn't be my cup of tea. People can see through my face at any point in time, so I cannot act for nuts.
I mean, you shouldn't undermine yourself. Thank you so much.
Not at all.
I think it's a great conversation, and we also got to learn a lot about.
It's been a lovely opportunity, lovely talking to both of you.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ankur. I think you've been a very dashing personality yourself. I think in the co-host role also you have performed very, very well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for patience listening. Thank you.